Hi, it's Penny here, and today I'm going to be wrapping up all the books that I read in July. So I think I read 15 books in July, and as usual I am going to do this book battle style, so I pair up all the books, I battle them against each other until we come up with the best book of the month. And I will also leave timestamps down below if you want to jump to a particular book, but let's get into it. So for this first battle I'm going to group some series together, and we've got the last 3 books of the Skulduggery Pleasant series by Landy up against book 1 and 2 from the Whetū series by Steph Matuku. So firstly, I am saying the last 3 books of the Skulduggery Pleasant series, but in truth there's actually more books. But these first 9 books of the series wrap up the first arc, and from everything I've heard, the second arc was released slightly later, follows some different characters, like it doesn't even have much of Skulduggery Pleasant in it, and it just has a very different feeling. Apparently there's a lot less humour in it, and the humour is one of the things that I liked about this series, so if that's gone, then I'm not particularly interested in continuing. But also, these last few books of the series I didn't particularly enjoy, which also puts me off continuing the series. So if you haven't heard about this series, basically we follow this girl named Stephanie who gets involved in the magical community and is mentored by the skeleton detective Skulduggery Pleasant. And there are many apocalyptic events that they have to battle against during their time together. There is also a prophecy, and you're pretty much waiting for the whole series to see how that prophecy is going to come about. This is quite a common thing, I think, that you see in middle grade series. So I think if you've read a few, you're basically just waiting to see how that prophecy is going to be twisted. And I didn't think the way that it was done in the end was that interesting. But I have to admit, I've read a lot of series where there was a prophecy and it got twisted at the end. So obviously if I was a younger middle grade young adult person reading this kind of book for the first time, which is what this series is more targeted at, then that probably would have had a bigger impact on me. But also I just felt like this series got more and more fractured as it went on. Again, I think people who really like the expansive world and are interested in all the different characters would probably love this ending because you get so much, but because so much of that so much I wasn't interested in, I just ended up being really bored. There was an element that I was waiting the whole series to see what would happen with that, and I also feel like that wasn't very well done at the end. And just the last book, the pacing was all over the place. It felt like nothing was happening for so long. And the very ending, I feel like the logic wasn't entirely there. So even though I quite enjoyed the beginning of the series, I liked the humour, I did always have the problem with there being too many bad guys to keep track of, and that continued through the whole series, and just in general ended up being too many characters for me to keep track of that I wasn't interested in. So definitely from Goodreads reviews I can see that I'm in the minority. A lot of people love the end of the series, but it just wasn't for me, so unfortunate. Then I read the Whetū series by Steph Matuku, so this is a New Zealand author, and I've read a couple of things by her before. I always find her writing to be really fast-paced and a lot of fun. This particular one is about this girl Whetū and her mother who go to live with this magician. Her mother is going to be like the personal assistant for this magician, not the magical assistant, the personal assistant. And there's also kind of this farm of magical animals there that Whetū ends up talking a lot with and helping to take care of them. In the second one, the golden ram, Ramses, goes missing and she has to travel through different magical worlds to find the ram. I really love the animals in this series and just the way that magic was incorporated. Didn't take itself too seriously and it was a lot of fun. Throughout the books as well there are illustrations. This one. But honestly, I loved both of these. I just thought they were a lot of fun. Exactly what I expected. Maybe better than I expected, actually. And I'm really hoping she'll write some more books in this series because I don't know how to say it was so much fun in a different way, but it was so much fun. They are quite simple. The chapters are very short, which helps with the fast pace. And it's not really trying to be anything other than just fun. And I loved it. So definitely I'll be reading some more stuff by Steph Matuku when she puts it out because I love these. You can also get editions of these written in Maori. These are the English versions, but they have Maori editions as well, which is pretty exciting. So this is a battle where I feel like it's obvious, but if I'm putting these two series up against each other, I'm going to pick the Whetū books, and I think specifically for reasons I liked the second book better, so that's the one that I'm going to put through to to the next round. Then the next battle is going to be between the remainder of the YA and middle grade fantasies that I read this month. So we've got Watch Hollow, The Alchemist's Shadow by Gregory Funaro up against Rule of Wolves by Leigh Bardugo. So firstly, Watch Hollow, The Alchemist's Shadow is the sequel to Watch Hollow, which is just a book I randomly picked up from the children's section of the library a couple of months back, and I thought I would catch up on the series straight away and read the sequel. So mainly we're following these children. In the first book, they go to live in this house with this magical clockwork clock, and there's these magical clockwork animals. It was really whimsical and lovely, but at the same time there's this dark forest encroaching on them and this alchemist that's up to no good. Then the second book was a little bit all over the place. We have these twins show up with their guardian, and it turns out that they are in fact the legal heirs to the house, although the family that's also living there have a legal claim as well. I feel like I knew right from the start how that was going to be resolved. But also then this minotaur turns up and the house starts turning into a labyrinth, so it's kind of got that Greek mythology aspect as well. The twins that show up also have an old puppet, which one of them keeps as a doll. That also has a magical element, and that bit actually, I don't know if it's fully appropriate for children. I think you wouldn't necessarily want children reading that part of the story, especially what gets revealed about the doll at the very end of the book. It's a little bit dark. And for me, I think what I liked about the first book was really the emotional side of it and the whimsical, magical clockwork animals, and I don't feel like you got as much of that in the second book. The second book seemed to be a lot more action-paced, like trying to escape this labyrinth, and in general, I don't like children's books that are very action-paced. Is that even a word? Action-paced? Action-packed? Whatever. You know what I mean. Action, just not really for me, or at least it needs to be integrated with more of a plot or more of an emotional side of the story, and I think that was lacking. So unfortunately, the sequel wasn't really for me. Then we've got Rule of Wolves, so this is probably the last book in the Grishaverse by Leigh Bardugo. So we had the first Grishaverse trilogy with Shadow and Bone, then we had the Crooked Kingdom, Six of Crows duology, and then lastly there was the King of Scars duology, King of Scars and Rule of Wolves. And in this we're primarily following Nikolai as he's struggling with his leadership position, but also kind of a magical curse that he has. And then we have Nina, who is off continuing being a spy. I was really hoping that this duology would explore Nina's magic more, because what Nina learns to do in the Six of Crows duology was really cool, and I thought there was so much potential. And I did feel like King of Scars explored that a little bit, but in Rule of Wolves, really both those storylines, both Nikolai's and Nina's, focused a lot more on the romance, with like the political side of the world kind of as a secondary plot. And while those two storylines did come together in the end, they didn't come together very strongly. I didn't think that those stories fit together very well. And I've definitely seen a lot of reviews where people like one part of the story and not the other. And I also think like I would have liked Nina's story much better if it had just been Nina's story. And I think if she'd focused on it just being Nina's story, she would have also put in some more cool magic shit. So again, not for me, but I do think people who like the original Grishaverse trilogy will probably like this one as well. You get a little bit of the characters from Six of Crows, you get a lot of all the characters from Shadow and Bone, and it definitely does give you some closure to the series. I have seen, since I read this, that Leigh Bardugo has said she probably won't write any more Grishaverse books for now, and I think that's the right call, because I think this is a good place to leave things. So, if I'm putting these two books up against each other, neither of them were really for me. But even though I criticised Rule of Wolves for the plot being mostly romance, I still actually think the plot in Rule of Wolves was better than the Watch Hollow one. So, we're going to put Rule of Wolves through to the next round. Then for our next battle, we've got a couple of mythology-based fantasies. So we've got The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller up against The Son of Shadows by Juliet Marillier. So, The Song of Achilles. I picked this up very cheap from a secondhand shop. I'd seen a lot of people raving about it, and so I had high hopes. I like Greek mythology a lot, and I was interested to see the Battle of Troy being retold, as well as learning a little bit more about Achilles and his boyfriend Patroclus. And I did think the writing in this was really lovely, but at the same time there were large parts of this book where it didn't really feel like anything was happening, And that's probably because this is a more character-focused book, technically. But at the same time, I actually feel like the characterizations of both Archilles and Patroclus were very superficial. I never really had any clear idea of why they liked each other, other than that, I guess, they found each other attractive. Other than that, they have very little in common. They barely even talked. They never talked about anything important until they argued right at the end. Patroclus himself doesn't actually actively decide to do anything. He just goes along with everything until about page 270 in the book. And I know it was around there because when it happened, I was like, oh my god, he made a decision. Amazing. Because he just hadn't done anything for the first half of the book. And since you're following his perspective, him just being like a passive passenger through his life and in the story just felt like it exacerbated the problem of there being no plot. There were a few good parts, but for the most part, it's lucky the writing was lovely, or otherwise I would have been really bored. So in the end, I think I would give this like 3 stars. It was okay, but I really don't get the hype. I definitely think there's better Greek retellings out there than this one. And even like, I think one of the things people like a lot is the romance. And I don't even think the romance was done very well, so I don't know. Then The Son of Shadows by Juliet Marillier. This is one where I do think the romance was done well, or at least it was done in the way that I like. I don't tend to like a lot of romance, but where I do like romance is where we've got kind of a hate to love situation where the characters are forced to work together. And through that partnership, they realize that there is a stronger connection. So this book is actually the sequel to The Daughter of the Forest. It's the second book in the Seven Waters series, which is like a 6-book series. And we're following the daughter of the main character from the first book. And there's a really strong theme of family in this book series. The situation right at the beginning is very difficult. There's a lot of conflict within the family, but at the same time, they do all really love each other. Just things are difficult, and I really liked the heartbreak of these difficult situations that people were having to work through. It was very slow paced, but again, I think that added to the realism of it and really gave you the space to get to know the characters and to get to feel their feelings. There's also a really strong element of Celtic myths being woven into the story, with our main character regularly telling these different stories to the other characters, or sometimes some of the other characters also tell little stories, and then you can kind of relate those into the things that actually happen. And after reading this one, I am really excited to continue the series and just see where this family's journey goes, because I think each book is kind of going to be following a different generation. But I guess as I continue the series, I'll be able to confirm that. Definitely, the first book in this series could be read as a standalone, but I feel like the second one has really started setting up the bigger story a lot more. So I feel like, again, this is a really obvious battle. If I'm putting these 2 books up against each other, I'm definitely going to pick The Son of the Shadows because it made me feel so many more things, whereas Song of Achilles just kind of made me feel frustrated. And that's not particularly my favorite feeling when I'm reading a book. Then the 2 books in the next battle are ones that are both based around zombies or cannibalism. So we've got When I Woke Up by Malcolm Devlin up against Eat the Rich by Sarah Gailey. And Then I Woke Up is a twist on the typical zombie story. So in this world, there is kind of a zombie plague spreading throughout the world. However, the zombies are not actually the zombies. The people who think they see zombies are the zombies. And when you catch this disease, you kind of start believing in this narrative, which makes you believe that other people are zombies. And if you fight back, you're actually fighting back against regular people. So we start off following this man in this mental care facility after he has realized that zombies are not zombies. And he's having to come to grips with the fact that he killed a bunch of people when actually there was no reason for that. And he's basically telling the story of how he was first infected, how he ended up at this mental care facility, and then he also goes on an extra journey, which really takes the ideas in an even more interesting direction. I thought it was a really great twist on the typical zombie story, and I also really liked some of the messages, especially around this narrative and how we decide what to believe. I really like the writing style, and I actually kind of would like to get some more stories in this world. world, because I feel like there's a lot of really cool stuff that could be done with it. But at the same time, I do think the ending was very satisfying, so this is definitely one that I would recommend. Then I read Eat the Rich, and this is a graphic novel comic book bind-up following this girl as she goes to meet her boyfriend's parents, her rich boyfriend's parents, and they are on this holiday island where everyone is very rich. She's not sure she's going to fit in, and then when she gets there, she discovers that there are some very strange things going on. I really like the story. The art style is the kind of art style I really like, with quite strong lines and really bright colors. The story was really easy to follow along with. That is something that I do find some comic books and graphic novels aren't so great at, but this one was great. And it was just a really fun story. The only thing I would say is that there was not really enough eating of the rich, and I would really like to get more of this story as well. And perhaps we could get a little bit more eating of the rich. But also, I kind of get the feeling this series might be finished, so that's a shame. So, if I'm putting these two books up against each other, I did really like both of them. However, I got more of what I wanted, and then I woke up. Eat the Rich was cool, but it really just felt like a beginning of a great idea, whereas I feel like And Then I Woke Up really realized what it was trying to achieve in terms of like the plot and the ideas and themes that it was exploring. So I'm going to put And Then I Woke Up through to the next round. Then for our next battle, we've got As Good as Dead by Holly Jackson up against Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. So As Good as Dead is the third and final book in the Good Girl's Guide to Murder trilogy. The first two books, we've got this girl named Pip investigating either murders or disappearances. She's like really interested in true crime, and she has a real sense of justice. Now, in this third book though, things go in a really different direction, and I wasn't sure how I felt about it. It was still really well written, and I felt like it could do some interesting things with this different direction, but in the end, it did not. I felt like everything that was done to Pip's character in this last book, even though it kind of made sense, it also went against so many things from the first book that I think that caused a lot of people not to like this. I was willing to let that slide, but then the very end of the book as well just felt very circular. It wasn't really going anywhere. It dragged out a lot, and then the very ending was quite unsatisfactory. It didn't really feel like an end to me, and so overall I was pretty disappointed in the end. As well, I think what a lot of people like from the first two books is following along with this mystery, seeing how Pip implements her investigation and kind of like trying to pick up on the clues and figure out what's going on before Pip does. But you don't really get a lot of that in the third book. The third book is much more like anxiety inducing and much more of a thriller, which again, some people will like, and perhaps if you go into the book expecting that, then you wouldn't be so frustrated with what actually happens. But I just think also the whole message of the third book, like, given this is a book for young adults, I'm not sure about that. So in the end, I think I give this 2 stars. Really risky direction by the author, and I'm not sure she pulled it off. Then we've got Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This is another one where it's hard to talk about what it's about because so much of what it's about is a mystery right from the beginning. Our main character wakes up in a room, doesn't know where he is, doesn't remember who he is, and has to work out what's going on. And given that it takes him a little while to figure out what's going on, it's definitely spoilers to tell you pretty much most of everything, except that it's a space book. That's given away by the cover. Also, it's an Andy Weir book, so there's a lot of science. I do think there are a few elements in this story where you have to suspend your disbelief a little bit. It's not necessarily that the science is wrong, but just the way that certain things happen or the way that things are organized isn't very realistic. But I think if you can overlook those things, the emotional journey of the story is really good. There's a really amazing friendship. There's a character that I think most people who I've talked to who've read this book say that they really love that character. There's some twists and turns along the way that just really make you feel something, or at least, again, most people I've talked to felt that way. And the ending was very satisfying. So I actually ended up really liking Project Hail Mary, even though there were a few bits that I struggled with a little bit. So if we are putting these two books up against each other, I'm definitely going to pick Project Hail Mary because it was a good story. It made me feel good. As Good as Dead just made me feel very anxious and then very dissatisfied. So again, not feelings that I want to feel while reading. And then our last battle, we've got Atomic Habits by James Clear up against Junji Ito's Cat Diary. So Atomic Habits is a fairly short audiobook just talking about habit building and how you can build habits to help you achieve what you want to achieve or help you spend your time in the way that you want to be spending it. I did find it very motivational. However, I will note, since I've read it, I have not implemented any of the strategies from that book, mainly because I haven't had time. I've been too stressed about work. I haven't had the mind space to think about any of these things. Also, this is the kind of book that I think I prefer physically, because while it is good to listen to it and potentially implement some of your habits while you listen to it, again, I just didn't have time for it, and then I don't feel like things stick in my mind as well from an audiobook like that. There were, though, multiple references throughout the audiobook to summary pages that you can look up online, and I do think if at any time I looked up those summary pages, the ideas would come back to me, I'd remember the structure, and I would be able to do something good with my habit forming. And I do think the overall structure that it is providing to you is a really good structure. So if habit building is something you're interested in, this is definitely a really good book. Then we've got Junji Ito's Cat Diary. I put these two books together because they're both kind of non-fiction, sort of. Junji Ito's Cat Diary is about him moving in with his fiancée and discovering that she is a cat person while he has always been a dog person. So they end up having these cats join their family, and it's just the story of him trying to figure out how to get along with these cats. And because Junji Ito is a horror manga writer normally, there's like a horror kind of element, although primarily just in the beginning of the story. It's kind of divided into several short stories, and I thought the vibe of the first few was really, really good. It was both humorous and scary at the same time, but then some of the later stories did feel a little bit just like normal stories that people would tell you about their cats that perhaps aren't the most interesting stories. But definitely the first couple of stories were a lot of fun, and I definitely recommend picking it up if you like kind of darker things and you like cats. It's also really short, so it won't take long to read. It's just like a nice little palate cleanser between other reads. Perfect. Perfect for me when I was starting my new job and my brain didn't function. Have I managed to get my brain functioning since I've gone back to work yet? I'm not sure that I have, but we're getting there. So if I had to put these two books up against each other, I just think even though Cat Diary was fun, it wasn't at the end, whereas Atomic Habits I just think is a really useful book. It's really well written, the structure is really good for what it's trying to teach. So for that reason, Atomic Habits is going to go through to the next round. That is all the books, so now we just need to wrap up the battle to work out which one was the best one. So for round two, we've got Whetū and the Hunt for Ramses by Steph Matuku up against Rule of Wolves by Leigh Bardugo. Honestly, I feel like a lot of people would prefer Rule of Wolves, but I just had so much fun with the Whetū books. I don't know if it's just the New Zealand vibe, even though they didn't feel like strongly New Zealand books, because it could be set almost anywhere because they're just in the middle of nowhere in the country, really. And the magician goes traveling all around the world magically. So like there's no sense of distance necessarily from the rest of the world. Anyway, it doesn't matter why. I really love the Whetū books, and so we're going to put Whetū and the Hunt for Ramses through to the semi-finals. I think it's the semi-finals. Who knows? Who cares? The next battle is going to be between The Son of Shadows by Juliet Marillier and Then I Woke Up by Malcolm Devlin. I really love both of these, and I do think it's often really hard to compare books where one is really long and the other one is very short, because the shorter one was much more about the ideas and the plot and the concept, whereas the longer one was more about the characters and these really strong emotions and the connection that you formed with them. The writing style for The Son of Shadows was really slow-paced, quite lovely, and it really took its time. Whereas in And Then I Woke Up, it was really trying to get the point across in a short amount of time, so it was quite concise, and the writing was very clever, well written, but not really in that same lovely way. So which one would I choose? Maybe we should pull out the spreadsheet. Okay, I checked my spreadsheet and then I woke up, got 0.2 more. And the main reason for that is just the themes and the concepts were really amazing. So for that, I'm going to put, and then I woke up through to the next round. Then our next battle is between Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir and Atomic Habits by James Clear. Again, very hard to compare a work of fiction to a non-fiction book, but overall I do think, even though I liked Atomic Habits, it hasn't stuck with me as much as I might have thought. I will definitely use the concepts in the future, but the story of Project Hail Mary, the character that everybody loves, that character is going to stick with me because they were so unique. So for that reason, I'm definitely going to pick Project Hail Mary to go through to the next round. And then somehow we have 3 books left. So let's have the semi-final be And Then I Woke Up by Malcolm Devlin up against Project Hail Mary. And again, it's kind of hard. And Then I Woke Up was just trying to be a very different book with a really strong concept and a really creative way of telling it. Whereas Project Hail Mary was more about the journey and the characters. So how do I put them up against each other? You know what I do? I look at my spreadsheet, although I think I know what my spreadsheet will say. So my spreadsheet, as I expected, says And Then I Woke Up, so that's the one I'll put through to the next round. I will say I do think And Then I Woke Up had stronger world building than Project Hail Mary. That's part of kind of my criticism of Project Hail Mary, is some of the world building didn't entirely make sense, especially the parts on Earth. That's all I can say without spoilers. Anyway, we're now going to be up to the finals where we're going to be putting And Then I Woke Up by Malcolm Devlin up against Whetū and the Hunt for Ramses. Oh, and again, just such different books. Whetū and the Hunt for Ramses is very simple. It's not trying to be anything fancy. It's not trying to be amazing concepts. It's just a fun adventure with some cool magical elements and some really funny animals. I don't know. Oh, and I just checked my spreadsheet and the ratings are very close. So I'm going to pick And Then I Woke Up as the best book that I read in the month of July. Do let me know if you read any of these books that I've talked about today. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well and I will see you next time.